This is a criminal case, a sex trafficking case involving real victims who deserve real justice. The FBI should be investigating it. Federal prosecutors should be prosecuting it. Courts should be handling it. That's how this was supposed to work. Instead, it became the single most dominant topic in American political commentary. Members of Congress, people who were elected to pass budgets, write legislation, conduct oversight of the executive branch, have spent enormous amounts of time and energy on something that should have been handled by law enforcement years ago. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying they're wrong to push on it. Given what we now know about how the FBI handled this case, congressional pressure may be the only reason any of this ever came to light. But they shouldn't have needed to. The fact that they did, the fact that this became a political story rather than a law enforcement story, that's the scandal inside the scandal. So how did we get here? How did a criminal case become a political weapon? How did something that should have been a courtroom story end up dominating an entire presidential election? And why, after all of it, after the files and the hearings and the congressional showdowns, has no one powerful been arrested? That's what this video is about, not the daily news cycle version of this story, the whole arc, from where it started to how it was weaponized to what it destroyed. Because once you see the full picture, you'll recognize the pattern, and you'll see it coming next time. If you're new here, I'm Jordan Vale, and we're building a community of people who refuse to stand by while democracy is under attack. We need voices like yours in this fight. Hit that subscribe button.
The fact that you guys are attacking us and making us look like we're crazy when we're just trying to save some fucking children pisses me off.
In the summer of 2020, something was spreading across Trump rallies that had nothing to do with policy. Signs that read, "Save the Children," flags with WWG1WGA, where we go one, we go all. The symbols of QAnon, a conspiracy theory that had been growing in the dark corners of the internet since 2017 and had finally broken into the mainstream. And the story QAnon was telling about Jeffrey Epstein was not subtle. According to QAnon, Epstein wasn't just a sex trafficker with powerful friends. He was a node in a global satanic cabal of Democratic politicians and Hollywood celebrities who were literally kidnapping children, torturing them, and draining them of a chemical compound called adrenochrome to stay young and powerful. The connection to Pizzagate, the debunked 2016 conspiracy theory about Hillary Clinton and a Washington pizza restaurant, was explicit. Comet Ping Pong became Epstein's island. The deep state became the cabal. And Trump, in this telling, was the secret warrior who was going to expose them all in an event called The Storm, Mass Arrests of Democrats, live on television. A Harvard academic study later found that the hashtag #SaveTheChildren hashtag was being used more for conspiracy content than for genuine anti-trafficking activism. Conspiratorial posts were being reshared at twice the rate of legitimate ones. Real trafficking hotlines were being flooded with calls from people reporting pizzerias. And when a reporter at an NBC town hall asked Trump directly whether he would denounce QAnon, here's what he said.
Let me ask you about QAnon. It is this theory that Democrats are a satanic pedophile ring and that you are the savior of that. Now, can you just once and for all state that that is completely not true and that disavow QAnon in its entirety?
I know nothing about QAnon.
I just told you.
I know very little. You told me, but what you tell me doesn't necessarily make it fact. I hate to say that. I know nothing about it. I do know they are very much against pedophilia. They fight it very hard.
Not a denouncement, a compliment. When asked whether he was secretly saving the world from a satanic cabal of pedophiles, Trump's response was, "Is that supposed to be a bad thing?" Now, this is important. None of it worked. The conspiracy theory was too crazy. Trump lost the 2020 election. QAnon's predictions about the storm failed completely. January 20th, 2021 came and went. Biden was inaugurated. No mass arrests. No Democrats hauled off in handcuffs. The conspiracy theory seemed to have collapsed under its own insanity. But here's the thing about seeds. You don't always see what they're growing. Buried inside all the satanic ritual nonsense was an idea that didn't require you to believe any of it. The idea that powerful people were being protected. The idea that there was information being hidden. The idea that only one political faction was willing to expose it. Those ideas didn't die with QAnon's failed predictions. They just waited for someone to strip away the crazy parts and keep the useful ones. That's exactly what happened next. Somewhere between 2021 and 2024, something remarkable happened in right-wing media. The language changed. Out went satanic cabal, adrenochrome, the storm, WWG1, WGA, baby eating. In came the files, the list, the flight logs, transparency, justice for victims. The conspiracy theory didn't die, it shed its skin. And in doing so, it became something far more powerful than it ever was when it was crazy. It became something that sounded reasonable. You didn't have to believe in adrenochrome harvesting to ask why the FBI was sitting on Epstein's files. You didn't have to believe in satanic rituals to wonder what was in the flight logs. Release the files sounded like good government transparency. It sounded like accountability. And suddenly, people who would never in a million years consider themselves QAnon followers were asking the exact same question the QAnon followers had been asking for years. Conservative media figured this out before anyone else. Commentators who had been careful to keep their distance from the crazier QAnon claims started picking up the "why won't they release the files" framing with both hands. It got ratings, it felt legitimate, and it pointed the finger squarely at Democrats, at Biden's DOJ, at the FBI under Biden, at a Democratic establishment supposedly protecting its own.
Folks, people are going to lose their minds if the Epstein client list is revealed. It is going to rock the Democrat Party. There's a reason they're hiding it.
And it wasn't just commentators. Trump's own allies were building expectations at every turn. Kash Patel, who would later become Trump's FBI director, told podcaster Benny Johnson in December 2023 that the reason the files hadn't been released was, quote, simple, because of who's on that list. He named Bill Gates. He said the people on that list were lobbying Congress night and day to keep it buried. He told his audience, put on your big boy pants and let us know who the pedophiles are. J.D. Vance on the campaign trail in October 2024 put it simply, seriously, we need to release the Epstein list. Elon Musk in October 2024 told his hundreds of millions of followers, if Trump wins, that Epstein client list is going to become public.
You know, I think part of why Kamala is getting so much support is that if Trump wins, that Epstein client list is going to become public.
So, by Election Day 2024, here's what millions of voters believed. There was an Epstein client list. It was full of powerful Democrats. Biden and his DOJ were hiding it. And Trump, if elected, would release it. Here's the part I need you to sit with for a second, because this is where it gets genuinely remarkable. A fact check from KWTX, backed up by Time magazine's reporting, found that Trump himself, the candidate, never once mentioned the Epstein files in any major campaign speech, rally, or policy announcement. Not once. He was asked about it twice in interviews. On Fox and Friends in June 2024, he said he would declassify the files. On Lex Friedman's podcast in September 2024, he said he'd certainly take a look at it and had no problem doing so. That's it. 2 interview answers when asked directly. His campaign operation posted a clip of the Fox and Friends moment and blasted it out, as if it were a solemn campaign pledge. His surrogates, Vance, Musk, Patel, Don Jr., did the heavy lifting. They built the expectation. They stoked the outrage. And Trump received all the political benefit of a promise he never fully made. Think about how sophisticated that is. You get credit for a promise without the accountability of actually making it. If you release the files, you're the hero. If you don't, well, you never really promised, did you? Strip out the Satan, keep the secret list. Replace the storm with transparency. Point the finger at Democrats, and let your allies do the promising. It worked. Trump won. And then, The weapon he'd used to win started pointing back at him. Donald Trump was sworn in for his second term in January 2025. His base was waiting for the files. The promise had been made, or at least that's what they believed. And for a little while, the administration played along. Attorney General Pam Bondi went on Fox News in February 2025 and told anchor John Roberts that the Epstein files were, quote, sitting on my desk right now to review. The White House handed out binders to conservative influencers labeled Epstein Files, Phase 1, and Declassified.
Your appearance at CPAC with Ben and with Ted Cruz, and one of the things that you alluded to, and this is something Donald Trump has talked about, that DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
But the people who received those binders were not impressed. Republican Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna publicly criticized them as old info. The base wanted the list. They wanted names. They wanted the arrests that had been implied, if never quite promised. Instead, by July 2025, Trump was on Truth Social calling the whole thing pretty boring stuff. He posted that America should not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about, and told the FBI to focus on voter fraud instead. The DOJ announced there was no client list. Epstein had died by suicide. The two foundational beliefs of the MAGA Epstein narrative, that there was a list and that Epstein was murdered to protect it, had just been officially denied by Trump's own Justice Department. A Wired investigation found that nearly 3 minutes of the footage from Epstein's death had been doctored. And then Elon Musk, who had done as much as anyone to build the expectation of a great Epstein reckoning, posted, without offering evidence, that Trump himself was in the Epstein files. Let that land for a second. The man who told his audience, if Trump wins, the list becomes public, was now suggesting Trump was on the list. A Reuters/Ipsos poll found 69% of Americans believed the government was still withholding information. The weapon had completely inverted. But the real story was happening in Congress, and it came from a direction nobody in the White House expected. Thomas Massie is a Republican congressman from Kentucky. He is not a Democrat. He is not a progressive. He is one of the most conservative members of the House, and he was furious. He introduced the Epstein Files Transparency Act alongside Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna, bipartisan, veto-proof in ambition, and completely unwelcome at the White House. Because here's what the Trump administration did when faced with an actual mechanism to release the files they had supposedly been promising to release. They tried to kill it. Anonymous administration officials told Republican members that voting for the Massey-Khanna bill would be a very hostile act to the administration. The pressure campaign was real, and it failed. On November 12, 2025, the discharge petition got 218 signatures, the minimum required to force a floor vote without leadership's blessing. The bill passed with a veto-proof majority. Trump had no choice. He signed it on November 18, 2025.
The President of the United States, President Trump, has announced on Truth Social that he has signed the bill to release the Epstein files. There's the Truth Social post. This move by the president comes after the House and Senate passed the bill this week, sending it to the president's desk. He writes, perhaps the truth about these Democrats and their associations with Jeffrey Epstein will soon be revealed because I have just signed the bill to release the Epstein files.
And then the files started coming out. December 22nd, 11,034 documents. December 23rd, 30,000 more. January 30th, 2026, 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, 180,000 images. And here's what the public immediately noticed. The redactions were a joke. People with basic photo editing software were unblacking the redacted sections within hours of release. Those hidden portions contained, according to reporting, significant findings about the members and techniques of Epstein's trafficking network. The FBI had redacted the names, and then people with Photoshop unredacted them at home. While all of this was happening, the administration's allies in conservative media found themselves in an impossible position. Media Matters analysis found that after the major file release, Fox News mentioned Epstein only 239 times. MSNBC logged 3,321 mentions, CNN 2,304, even Newsmax 1,464. The network that had spent years building the release the files narrative went almost silent the moment the files arrived. Greg Gutfeld on air warned his audience that future releases would be distorted. Jesse Waters, who in 2023 had asked the camera, "Who protects a dead pedophile when children are raped?" had very little to say now that the files were out. Tucker Carlson did not go silent. He went in a different direction entirely. By July 2025, he was accusing Bondi of covering up crimes. He told NBC that Bondi had made a bunch of ludicrous claims. He hosted a 2.5-hour podcast episode on Epstein. He suggested that American and Israeli intelligence services were at the center of the cover-up.
The current DOJ under Pam Bondi is covering up crimes. Very serious crimes by their own description. Why are they doing that?
The man who spent years asking, "Why won't they release the files?" was now, with his own party running the DOJ and FBI, still finding a way to blame a cover-up. The target just shifted from Democrats to the administration itself. And then February 2026 arrived, and things got worse. February 14th, Bondi publicly announced that all Epstein-related files have been released to the public. February 16th, Channel 4 News published an investigation showing the FBI holds between 20 and 40 terabytes of Epstein-related data. What had been released to the public? Approximately 300 gigabytes. That's around 2% of the total. 98% of the evidence remains hidden.
From the earliest stages, investigators were talking about Epstein's data totaling many, many times what has so far been released. In June 2020, one wrote, "We expect the data to be somewhere around 20 to 40 terabytes," noting that the total capacity of the devices was up to 50 terabytes. Then as recently as last year, long after the investigations into Epstein and his associates had ended, the figures quoted remained massive. We're looking at a total of approximately 14.6 terabytes of archived data, said another email. To put that in context, it is almost 15,000 gigabytes. But now, a year on from that, the total data released, claimed to be some 300 gigabytes, accounts for just 2% of the total Epstein data that officials were discussing just last year.
Bondi claimed all files had been released. Channel 4's investigation suggested only 2% had. Those two things cannot both be true. February 15th. Thomas Massie, the Republican who forced the file release, went on ABC's This Week and called the Trump administration, and I want to be precise here, this is a Republican congressman describing a Republican president's administration. He called it the Epstein administration.
And just very quickly, if you will, you've supported most of what Donald Trump has done during his presidency. But because of your actions with these files, he is supporting your primary opponent and has waged very personal attacks on you. I know we just have a few seconds here, but just your reaction to that.
Look, this is about the Epstein class, the people who are funding the attacks against me. They may or may not be implicated in these files, but they were certainly rubbing shoulders with the people who are in these files. They're billionaires who are friends with these people, and that's what I'm up against in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump told us that even though, he had dinner with these kinds of people in New York City and West Palm Beach, that he would be transparent, but he's not. He's still in with the Epstein class. This is the Epstein administration, and they're attacking me for trying to get these files released.
February 16th, text messages from Steve Bannon surfaced, showing that Bannon had told associates that Epstein believed Trump was beyond borderline and had suggested invoking the 25th Amendment. Michael Flynn, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Elon Musk all turned on Bannon publicly. February 17th, reporting emerged indicating the FBI had never searched Zorro Ranch, Epstein's New Mexico property. A New Mexico Truth Commission was formed specifically to investigate the FBI's handling of the case. February 18th, Leslie Wexner, the billionaire founder of L Brands, who is described in FBI case files as having a role in Epstein's network, gave a deposition. According to reporting, there is no public record of the FBI ever having questioned him, despite his name appearing in their own documents.
There is no single person that was more involved in providing Jeffrey Epstein with the financial support to commit his crimes than Les Wexner.
Democrats flew in from D.C. to question Leslie Wexner, founder of L Brands, which created Victoria's Secret, Bath & Body Works, and Abercrombie & Fitch, questioning him about his longtime business relationship and friendship with Epstein, accused of running a child sex trafficking ring.
This community deserves to know why his money was used to traffic, abuse, and rape women and children.
Sit with that for a second. According to FBI records reviewed by investigators and reporters, Wexner's name appears in connection with Epstein's network, and there is no public record of the FBI ever questioning him, not once. Meanwhile, Trump's own Deputy Attorney General, paraphrasing here because the legal context matters, suggested that being socially connected to Epstein did not constitute a crime, which is true, and also beside the point when victims are asking why no one with real institutional power has faced any accountability at all. Here's where things stand, and I want to be completely clear about this. The files that were promised as a weapon against Democrats turned out to contain Trump's own cabinet members and allies. Howard Lutnick, Trump's Commerce Secretary, said in a podcast that he had cut ties with Epstein in 2005. When pressed, he acknowledged visiting Epstein's island in 2012, 7 years later. The weapon, fired at Democrats, hit the people holding the gun. But here's the thing about weapons in politics. The people who get hurt worst are never the ones with power. They're the victims. The young women who testified against Epstein, Virginia Giuffre, who has spent years trying to be believed, Annie Farmer. The dozens of women whose names appear in those files not as perpetrators, but as people who were abused. They were used, first by Epstein, then by the politicians who turned their trauma into a campaign tool, then by the media ecosystem that made the list into a ratings machine, and now by an administration that is sitting on 98% of the evidence and claiming they released everything, and the FBI. We need to talk about the FBI, because according to reporting and records reviewed by investigators, this agency failed to search Epstein's New Mexico ranch, failed to question Wexner despite his name appearing in their own files, and issued a memo in February 2025 confirming they never found a client list, just months after their own leaders had been in front of cameras implying one existed. The Harvard study found that QAnon co-opted the Save the Children movement in 2020. But here's the pattern I want you to recognize for next time, because there will be a next time. The QAnon version failed because it was too crazy. The mainstreamed version succeeded because it sounded like accountability. The way you tell the difference, the way you protect yourself from being manipulated by this pattern in the future, is to ask one question. Who benefits from you being angry, and what are they actually doing about it? Because in 2024, the people telling you to be angry about the Epstein files were also the people who would go on to run the DOJ and the FBI. They had the power to release those files on day one. Instead, they tried to stop the bill that would have forced it. They called the people demanding release their enemies, and now they're claiming they released everything, while Channel 4 is reporting 98% is still hidden. The conspiracy theory that started as insane and became mainstream has now done something genuinely remarkable. It has exposed real institutional failure, real FBI negligence, real powerful people who were never questioned. And it has done so in a way that's destroyed the administration that tried to use it as a weapon. The weapon worked, and then it backfired. So here's the answer to the question I asked at the beginning. Why has no one powerful been arrested? Not because there isn't evidence. We have 3 million pages of it, and that's only 2% of what the FBI is holding. Not because the crimes weren't serious enough, not because investigators didn't know who was involved. The answer is simpler and more damning than any conspiracy theory. Because at every moment when someone with actual power could have acted, it was more useful not to. The files were worth more as a threat than as a prosecution. As long as the list stayed hidden, it was a weapon anyone could aim at anyone. Administrations of both parties oversaw this investigation and chose containment over prosecution. The DOJ had the files and sat on them. The FBI named co-conspirators and never questioned them. The White House that campaigned on releasing everything then fought the bill that would have forced it. And through all of it, the people who actually abused those victims and the people who enabled it stayed protected. Nobody got arrested because the people with the power to arrest someone decided, again and again, that the files were more valuable as a political tool than as evidence. That's not a conspiracy. That's just how power protects itself. We now have over 3 million pages of Epstein documents, 2,000 videos, 180,000 images. We have FBI documents naming co-conspirators who were never questioned. We have redactions that Photoshop users cracked at home. We have a Republican congressman calling this the Epstein administration. We have 98% of the evidence still hidden, and we still have no powerful person who has been arrested. Not one. The question that remains, the one nobody in power seems interested in answering, is what it would actually take to change that. Share this video with someone who's been trying to follow this story, because what I've laid out here isn't the daily news cycle. It's the complete arc of how a criminal case got turned into a political weapon. From the crazy conspiracy that didn't work, to the respectable one that did, to the weapon that came back around. Understanding that pattern matters, because here's what's actually at stake. A functioning democracy requires that no one is above the law. It requires that law enforcement agencies serve justice, not the powerful people who oversee them. And it requires that when evidence exists, it gets used in courtrooms, not held in reserve as a threat, not leaked selectively to damage political opponents, not buried until someone finds a way to make it useful. When that breaks down, when the justice system becomes just another political tool, democracy itself starts to hollow out. That's what this story is really about, and it's why it matters long after the news cycle moves on. Thanks for spending a few minutes digging into this with me. If you want more grounded, progressive commentary without the outrage bait, subscribe and stick around. Every time you watch, share, and engage, it helps build a community that believes democracy is worth understanding and defending. I'll see you in the next video.